Betrayal is one of the most devastating human experiences. It shakes your faith in people, damages your trust, and leaves wounds that take years to heal. But here's something most people overlook. Betrayal doesn't just destroy the betrayed, it destroys the betrayer even more. You see, when someone chooses to betray, they think they're gaining an advantage, outplaying you, or securing their own interests. What they fail to realize is that betrayal is a self-inflicted wound, a slow-acting poison that corrodes their soul, their reputation, and ultimately their future. They might feel powerful in the moment, like they've won some kind of twisted game, but what they don't see, what they refuse to acknowledge, is that every betrayal comes with a price. It's a price that isn't paid immediately, but when it comes due, it's always higher than expected. The universe has a way of balancing the scales, and those who betray will eventually face the consequences of their actions. Whether it's through guilt, loss, or their own downfall, they will pay for their choices. Because here's the truth. When you betray someone, you don't just lose them. You lose yourself. Betrayers often think they've won. They believe they've outsmarted, manipulated, or deceived their way into a better position. Maybe they stole an opportunity, backstabbed a friend, or walked away without facing consequences. In their mind, they've played the game and come out on top. But what they don't realize is that their so-called victory is an illusion. The moment they choose betrayal, they set themselves on a path of destruction. Why? Because trust is the foundation of everything: relationships, business, success, and even self-respect. Once a person is known as a betrayer, that foundation begins to crack. People remember betrayal, even if it's not exposed immediately. The truth has a way of surfacing. And when it does, the betrayer isn't seen as smart or powerful. They're seen as weak, disloyal, and unworthy of trust. The success they gain through betrayal is short-lived, because real success requires allies, partnerships, and respect. Without those, they're left standing alone. The people they deceived may move on, heal, and thrive, but the betrayer will always carry the weight of their actions. That illusion of victory, it fades fast when they realize they've won nothing but isolation. Reputation is everything. It takes years to build, but only moments to destroy. And betrayal, it's the fastest way to ruin a name forever. The betrayer might think they've escaped consequences, but the truth is, every act of deception leaves a mark. People talk, word spreads. No matter how carefully they cover their tracks, betrayal has a way of resurfacing at the worst possible moments. A person who betrays a friend today will find themselves without allies tomorrow. A business partner who cheats their way to the top will discover that no one trusts them when they need support the most. A liar who manipulates others will one day be questioned on every word they say. Even if the betrayer convinces themselves that they've gotten away with it, they haven't. They're carrying a silent curse, a reputation that whispers behind their back, a lack of credibility that follows them like a shadow. The worst part, once someone is branded as untrustworthy, it's nearly impossible to undo. People forgive, but they don't forget. And when trust is broken, the betrayer becomes their own worst enemy. Because in the end, the world doesn't just judge us by our successes, it judges us by our character. And once betrayal defines someone's character, their downfall is only a matter of time. There's one thing every betrayer eventually learns the hard way. Betrayal is a one-way ticket to loneliness. At first, they may feel powerful, thinking they've manipulated, deceived, or outplayed others. But over time, they start to realize something. They're alone. The people they once called friends have distanced themselves. The allies they thought they had no longer trust them. Even those who once admired them now see them for what they truly are. Because here's the truth, no one wants to be around a snake. Even those who tolerated them before start keeping their distance. Because deep down, everyone knows that a betrayer today could easily betray again tomorrow. Relationships built on deceit have no foundation. And once trust is gone, so is connection. And the worst part? The betrayer doesn't just lose others, they lose themselves. They become trapped in a cycle of paranoia, constantly wondering if someone will betray them the way they've betrayed others. Because that's the irony of betrayal. The person who does it can never truly trust anyone again. They become isolated, not because people hate them, but because no one wants to take the risk of letting them in. And eventually that isolation turns into regret. But by the time they realize what they've lost, it's already too late. Betrayal comes with a cost, and one of the heaviest burdens is guilt. Even if a betrayer convinces themselves that what they did was justified, even if they feel no immediate remorse, guilt has a way of creeping in. It doesn't always show up right away, but it waits. It lingers in quiet moments, in sleepless nights, in the empty spaces where trust used to be. They might distract themselves with success, pleasure, or new connections, but deep down, they know. They know they crossed a line. They know they hurt someone who trusted them. And no matter how much they try to ignore it, that knowledge never truly goes away. Over time, the weight of their choices builds up. It turns into self-doubt, anxiety, and a constant need to prove themselves, because deep down they feel like frauds. They might put on a strong face, act like nothing happened, but the mind doesn't forget. Regret starts to set in, especially when they see the person they betrayed moving on, growing, and thriving without them. That's the moment it hits the realization that they didn't just lose someone else's trust, they lost their own self-respect. And that's a burden no amount of success can ever erase. Betrayal is never a one-time event. It's a cycle. What a betrayer doesn't realize is that the same energy they put out into the world will eventually come back to them. Call it karma, justice, or the law of reciprocity, but betrayal always returns to its source. They might think they've won, but the universe keeps score. The same way they deceive, manipulated, or abandon someone, they will eventually experience it themselves. Maybe it's a business deal that falls through because no one trusts them. Maybe it's a personal relationship where they finally feel real connection, only to be deceived the way they once deceived others. And when it happens, it's not just painful, it's humiliating, because deep down they'll know. They'll know they set this chain of events in motion. They'll remember the moment they chose betrayal, and they'll see how that choice is now costing them everything they once valued. The worst part, when they need someone to lean on, there will be no one left, because the people they burned will be too far gone, too healed, and too wise to let them back in. The betrayer is left with the same pain they once inflicted, proving that in the end, no one truly gets away with it. What most betrayers fail to understand is that betrayal isn't just an attack on others, It's an attack on themselves. Every time they choose to lie, deceive, or manipulate, they chip away at their own self-worth. They may not see it at first. They may even convince themselves that they're in control, that they're winning. But deep down, something begins to change. They start to see themselves differently. The more they betray, the more they have to justify their actions, twisting reality to avoid facing the truth. But no matter how much they rationalize, the damage is done. Their identity slowly becomes tied to deceit. And once that happens, it's almost impossible to escape. People who betray often find themselves caught in a spiral. Lying becomes second nature, manipulation becomes a habit, and trust becomes something they can no longer give or receive. The worst part, they lose the ability to respect themselves. They know who they've become. They may try to silence that inner voice with distractions, success, or even more deception, but it's always there. Because no matter how much they gain from betrayal, they always lose something far greater, the ability to look in the mirror and feel proud of who they are. One of the most ironic consequences of betrayal is the paranoia it creates. When someone betrays others, they start to assume that everyone operates the same way. They begin to see deception everywhere, even where it doesn't exist. They second-guess people's motives, question every act of kindness, and live in constant fear that someone will do to them what they've done to others. And in many cases, they're right, because betrayal breeds betrayal. The same people they manipulated may turn against them. The allies they once had may choose to strike back. The relationships they damaged may come full circle. This isn't just paranoia, it's a reality they've created for themselves. And even if no one actually betrays them, they will always feel like it's just a matter of time. They become prisoners of their own actions, unable to trust, unable to relax, unable to escape the fear of being deceived. They thought betrayal would give them power, but instead it leaves them powerless, trapped in a world where no one, not even themselves, can be trusted. And that's the cruelest part of all. In trying to outsmart others, they've only outsmarted themselves into a life of isolation, fear, and suspicion. Betrayal isn't just a moment, it's a time bomb. It might not explode right away, but eventually it does. The betrayer thinks they've secured their position, taken what they wanted, and moved forward unscathed. But betrayal has a way of eating away at everything they've built. It starts with small cracks, a lost friendship, a business deal that falls apart, a partner who no longer trusts them. Then those cracks grow. Their reputation declines, opportunities dry up, and the people who once stood by them slowly disappear. Even those who once supported their deception begin to distance themselves because no one wants to be close to a ticking bomb. And when that final moment comes, when the foundation they built through lies and manipulation finally crumbles, they realize they have no one to blame but themselves. The world may not always punish betrayal instantly, but it never lets it go unchecked. Whether it takes months or years, the betrayer's downfall is inevitable. And when they finally stand in the wreckage of their own making, they will understand a painful truth. Betrayal isn't a path to power. It's a shortcut to self-destruction. At the end of the road, every betrayer faces the same fate: loss. They might have gained something in the short term, money, status, or power, but what they lose in the long run is far greater. They lose trust, credibility, real relationships, and most importantly, themselves. Because betrayal isn't just about what you do to others, It's about what you do to your own soul. The people they betrayed, they move on, heal, and often come back stronger, but the betrayer is left with a life built on deception, and deception is never a strong foundation. They become ghosts in their own world, feared, distrusted, and ultimately forgotten, because people remember betrayal. They remember who was there for them and who turned their back. And while the betrayed rebuild, the betrayer remains trapped in the ruins of their choices. This is the ultimate truth about betrayal. It doesn't make someone powerful, it reveals their weakness. And in the end, it's not the betrayed who suffer the most, it's the betrayer who watches their own downfall unfold, unable to escape the fate they created.